My name is Nadya Ansari, and I'm a junior in high school. In today's society, uncomfortable conversations are easily avoidable. The idea of participating in a conversation where the feelings of criticism, responsibility, and shame are dominant is intimidating. This pattern of avoidance is commonly seen in discussions about race, as society looks to escape the harsh reality of racism. Conversations about race are different for everyone. However, the participation of a diverse group of individuals ultimately drives the change. A successful conversation is one that provides a setting where the aspects of listening and contributing are equal, in a space where everyone involved can participate. As someone who attends a predominantly white institution, my experiences with conversations about race have been lacking. Having productive conversations around racism requires participation from not just people of color, but also white people. Being a brown girl in a predominantly white institution has taught me a lot about myself. Being in high school, I have paid close attention to my place in conversations surrounding race. When I'm in class and we start conversing about race, I immediately become hyper-aware that I am the only person of color in the room. Questions that come to mind are, how am I supposed to represent an entire community in conversations about race? Is it my job to speak for my whole community? And I can only speak from my own experience. However, when my white peers look at me, wondering what I'm going to say, am I becoming an educator? When students of color like myself are faced with conversations about race in a predominantly white space, all of these questions ignite feelings of isolation and responsibility. In the past, people of color have been looked to with the responsibility to educate others. However, people of color should never have the obligation to educate white people on their own racism. Instead, white people should learn to combat their own racism within themselves. So here's my dilemma. I'm telling you that I'm not the educator, and I should not be the person responsible for teaching you what you should or should not do to combat racism. But at the same time, I'm asking you to listen and learn from me. People of color are often forced into the role of an educator. White peers have asked me to call someone out on racist behavior because I, quote, know more about racism or understand the problem more than them. This is a shared experience for people of color. Despite the negative connotations that are associated with conversations about race, there is no denying that we need to have them. Without productive conversations about race, there are fewer opportunities for those who are less educated about racism to learn about the lives of people of color and the struggle of racism in every community. One of the first barriers to deconstructing racism is a lack of knowledge. White people are less or not at all aware of the racism that people of color are constantly battling. Whether that racism is through microaggressions, direct implications of hate, or other forms, people that don't experience these acts firsthand are just not aware of how common they are, compared to people of color who consistently have to worry about racism. If we can reinvent the way we handle conversations about race, it will drive change. It is important to discuss race with students because younger generations will be the people supporting a hopeful future without racism and division. Intergenerational conversations are an especially important aspect of changing conversations about race. Younger generations are the future, so opening the conversation of inclusivity, diversity, and discrimination is important for creating change. Additionally, younger generations having conversations about race is really important for kids of color, especially those in predominantly white communities. Opening the door for conversation and learning can create lots of change and eventually work towards relieving the pain that people of color face in society. Also, of course, kids are impressionable, and if the current work being done is to unlearn the racism that is embedded in society, starting with the younger generation is crucial. There are generational barriers between older and younger generations that are fueled by stigmas and stereotypes. Opening spaces where different generations can converse about racism provides an opportunity for people to learn from history and understand what needs to change for history not to repeat itself. Racism has been stifling the world for years, and while older generations have worked to combat it, there is still a long way to go. Recently, I participated in a panel discussion hosted by the Independent School Gender Project that consisted of myself and a few other students from my high school. This panel was focused on gender and intersectionality and was a prime example of an intergenerational setting that allowed an opportunity for dialogue about change. Intersectionality is a key part of discussing race in any setting and provides the basis for recognizing the need for a diverse space. So what is intersectionality? It is the overlapping social categories such as race, class, and gender that apply to an individual. Intersectionality also directly impacts the many types of racism that people of color are faced with. Without understanding intersectionality, we cannot take action against racism. Including the importance of intersectionality in conversations about race provides an aspect of connecting different identities, which softens the commonality of exclusion when discussing race and adds the aspect of empathy. When productive conversations about race occur, internalized racism comes to light. Internalized racism is bias or offensive values that an individual will possess unknowingly. It stems from years of learning racist ideals that are so common that they have become normal. Internalized racism can even be more harmful than direct racism. I believe this is because if someone is openly racist, it is easy to discount their hateful behavior, especially because it is often someone you don't know. Internalized racism can arise unintentionally, even in your closest relationships, and can be much more difficult to avoid. One example is when white people say, quote, "I don't see color," as a way to indicate they could never behave in a racist way. This microaggression denies people of color of their racial identity and therefore dismisses experiences that stem from their race. From my experience, a powerful way to acknowledge and eliminate internalized racism is by having conversations, and most importantly, listening to each other. Internalized racism can thrive in environments that refuse to acknowledge the deep-seated racism that we all possess simply because of our own environments. Providing a space for acknowledgement can be the first step to undoing learned racist ideals. My generation has been taught to be upstanders. We have been told that when we see something, we should do something about it and take action. And those of you who are not in my generation, I believe have been told the same thing. So why are we still having the same conversation? My hope for the future is that we can continue to build productive conversations about race to help future generations understand and work against racism. We as a community need to drive change by assessing why conversations about race are necessary. I'm talking to you today because it is a passion of mine to help people understand the racism that exists in themselves and their communities. I have found that while racism may be obvious to me, it is often not seen by people that don't experience it. I want you all to reflect on your own biases and think about what is fueling them and how you can change that. I hope this reflection will inspire you to participate in conversations about race and create change to combat racism within yourselves and your communities. Thank you.